Bandit 12 offers quite a few challenges, and it's also a useful level for learning some basic Linux commands as well as some archiving commands. Let's start by taking a look at our data.txt file here. We can read from the description that it is a hex dump of a file that has been repeatedly compressed. A hex dump is basically storage or something in RAM or something on a hard drive that is just kind of a hexadecimal view of a snapshot in time of this file. Let's take a look at what that looks like just by using cat, and we'll just cat our data.txt file, and we can see that we see a lot of hex here, and we can see a few things. We can see like data2.bin up here is towards the top of this file. Let's do what is suggested here and create a directory under temp to use as our basically a working directory, so we can manipulate files and things like that. So let's start by doing a mkdir, which is making a directory. And we'll call it temp, and we will just call this test. Let's see if there's a test1. Okay. Let's make a directory called test1, and we're going to copy this data.txt file, and we're going to move it into test1. And then let's just go ahead and move to our testing directory here. Okay, so we can see that we are in temp/test1. The first thing we want to do is we know that this is a hex dump. So let's take a look at our hex dump command, which is this xxd, which is used to create and decode hex dumps. We see from the description that it can make a hex dump or do the reverse. We see quite a few things here. There are several options when it comes to usage. The most important one that we want to do here is the -r. So that's the reverse operation, which is converting a hex dump into a binary file. That will write this output, and let's just go ahead and use that and apply it to our temporary file. Let's do a hex dump of data.txt, and we're going to put that into a file called, we're going to call it data2.bin. After that, we can take a look at what files are in our directory, and we see that data2.bin is there, and we can get more information about this. Well, we could get information about the initial file as well. Let's do that first here. So if we get information about file data.txt, it's just going to tell us that it's ASCII text. File can't detect whether something is a hex dump or not. We could tell that through either looking at the file or obviously, Bandit told us that is that file type. So let's take a look at what our data2.bin is though. And we can see that this is gzip compressed data. It was a file called data2.bin. So what we're going to do is we're going to rename this file, and we're going to do that with the mv command. So we're going to move this from data2.bin, and we're going to call it data2.gz. Simple enough. We're just changing the file extension, and we're going to use gzip to uncompress that file. Let's take a look at our help for gzip. And we can see that there are some standard arguments here. The most important one that we're going to be dealing with right here is the decompress option. Let's just use gzip to decompress our data2.gz. And we can just do a directory list here, and we see a new file. This has replaced the previous file, this data2, and let's take a look at file data2. We see that this is a bzip2 compressed file, and what we want to do with that is a similar command, or we want to do something similar to what we did with gzip. So let's move this data2 to data2.bz. And again, bzip2 is similar to gzip in that it uses the tag D. Let's just take a look at the help for bzip, and we see that it's nearly identical. Using the -d command, we can decompress this. So let's do a -d and point it at data2.bz. And now let's take another look and see we have a new data2 file. So let's take a look at this file. And we can see that it is a gzip compressed data. So this was data4.bin. We're just going to rename just like we did earlier. So let's we're going to move data2 and we're going to put it into data. We can call it whatever we want, really. Let's go with data4.gz. Taking a look at our files, we have this data4.gz, and so we can gzip-d data4, and let's take another look, and we see our data4 right there. Let's take a look at data4 here, and so this is a tar archive. We're going to use the tar command to do something similar. There's a slightly different syntax for tar, but we are going to need to rename this. Let's take a look at, so we're going to move this data4 to data4.tar, and let's take a look at our tar help file. Tar is a little bit more extensive in terms of options, but I'm just scrolling up here, yeah, a lot more extensive in terms of options. But scrolling up, we can see, eventually we'll get to some examples that we can use. So I think we just want to extract all the files from this archive. So we're going to do tar-x and -f. So let's just copy this. And we're just going to paste this in here. Obviously our file is called data4.tar. Going to hit enter and take a look at our files here. We see that extracting this has created a new file, not just overwritten the previous file, and there's a data5.bin. Let's take a look at data5. We see that's another tar archive, so let's take our data5 and we can rename this as well. So let's move data5.bin and call it data5.tar. And again, we'll just go through our previous commands, hitting the up arrow, and we're going to uncompress this via tar again. So let's take a look, and now there's a data6.bin. Again, we're just kind of repeating what we did every time around. So we're taking a look at it via the file command, which gives us information about how the file is compressed, and then we are renaming that file to use one of the compression tools, and we are decompressing that file according to what that tool is. Again, we're going to keep stepping through these commands here, so we're going to move data6.bin, and we're going to move that to data6.bz, and we're going to bzip decompress that, data6.bz. Oh, it's bzip2, because that's how things work. Okay, so let's take a look at our file here. And we see data6, so file data6. And once again, this is another tar archive. So the challenge obviously told us that it has been repeatedly compressed. So let's move data6 to data6.tar. And we will, again, we can tar-xf data6.tar. Take a look at our files here, and we have a data8.bin, which is the new file that's been created. So let's take a look at file data8. And we can see this is a gzip file. So again, we will rename this by using the mv command, data8.bin, .bin, and we will call it data8.gzip. 8.gz. And let's decompress that. So let's take a look at data8.gz. And we see our data8 file. So let's take a look at data8. And we can see this is ASCII text, so that's promising. So let's take a look at data8. And from there, we get the password to level 13. We learned quite a bit in terms of how to use the extracting files with tar, gzip, bzip. We learned a little bit about using xxd to convert a hex dump into a binary file. And then to start things, we use the make directory to make a temporary directory and use the copy and move commands to copy files, as well as using move to rename. And also importantly, we use this file command to get more information about a file that's in our directory. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you learned something. This was kind of a time-consuming process, but I think it's helpful, and we'll move on to Bandit 13.